The man suddenly realized that their ship was not sailing on the sea at all, but floating above a submerged city. Below him was the rooftop of a skyscraper dozens of stories high. He looked around in horror. The once bustling city was now reduced to just a few of the tallest buildings, like isolated islands rising from the water. Everything else sank beneath the unfathomable depths of the sea. What kind of disaster could this city have endured? What kind of catastrophe could reduce a civilization built of steel and concrete to nothing overnight? What kind of terrifying force could tear the entire Earth apart, leaving humanity's only escape route as a makeshift suspension bridge made of a few ropes? And what kind of apocalypse could raise towering waves tens of meters high on the sea surface, swallowing up all life on the shore in an instant? Today, I'm going to introduce you to this newly released apocalyptic disaster film. Join the main characters on their perilous journey to survive in this world-ending catastrophe. The origin of this catastrophe dates back 5 years. 2 comets, like the scythe of death, tore the Earth apart. The terrifying impact instantly ignited more than half of the Earth. The shock wave, like a final judgment, swept across every inch of land. Within just a few hours, 80% of the world's population had completely disappeared. 5 years have passed, and the Earth has still not recovered from that catastrophe. Countless comet fragments are still orbiting the Earth. Like ticking time bombs, they could strike the ground without warning at any moment. The survivors tried to rebuild their homes, but soon discovered that this ravaged world offered no second chance. The ubiquitous radiation could kill an adult in 3 minutes. But strangely, some places miraculously remained green, as if the disaster had never happened. Finding those uncontaminated havens became the survivors' only hope. The protagonist, John, and his family, along with others, barely survived in a bunker. But the outside environment is getting worse, with frequent earthquakes and volcanic eruptions possible at any time. Everyone in the bunker knows that they can't hold out much longer, and they have to find a way out. That day, John put on his protective suit and went into the wasteland again. After crossing a beach, a coastline suddenly appeared before him. John excitedly told his colleagues at the wireless store that there were several lifeboats on the beach, and further out at sea, a heavily damaged destroyer was quietly floating there. John crawled into the destroyer through a hole in the bottom and searched the entire ship. There were no supplies, no survivors, only a few charred corpses. Just as he was about to leave, he found a purple flower tucked in a ship's log. John hadn't seen a flower in 5 years. He gave it to his wife. He knew she would like it. Suddenly, a comrade's urgent alarm came through the headset. A radiation storm would arrive in 1 minute. John had just run out of the destroyer when he looked back and saw a black storm wall surging wildly in the distance. Terrifying lightning kept exploding inside the storm. If he were to be swept in, the consequences would be unimaginable. John dared not think any further and ran desperately. He shouted into the headset for his comrades to open the door in advance, assuring them that he could reach the distant bunker before the storm arrived. The iron door of the bunker slowly opened, but the storm had already caught up with him. Just as he rushed to the door, a bolt of lightning exploded behind him. John leaped up and lunged at the gate. After flipping over, he immediately called to his companions to close the gate. The danger receded. After being fully disinfected and taking off his protective suit, John sat there panting heavily. The scene from earlier was still replaying in his mind. In the D-Bar cafeteria, John handed the purple flower to his wife. Anna's eyes lit up as she took the flower. 5 years had passed. She'd forgotten what flowers looked like. Her son, Nathan, sitting beside her, looked at the flower and suddenly blurted out, "I want to go outside too." John's face darkened, and he immediately warned his son that it was too dangerous outside and they absolutely couldn't go out. Nathan pursed his lips and said nothing more. Anna was a member of the bunker's management team. During a meeting, she was discussing receiving people seeking help from outside. Several administrators in the conference room were watching the monitors and discussing something when suddenly all the screens froze. The next second, the entire bunker shook violently. Fortunately, John was familiar with the terrain because he often went out. He led his wife and children around the crowd and ran towards the back door. The passageway to the back door was already beginning to collapse. The 3 rushed out at the last moment.
After escaping the bunker, the scene before them was even more chaotic. There were crowds of refugees everywhere. Some were wearing protective masks, some were naked. Everyone was running frantically in one direction. The few lifeboats on the beach became the only hope for escape. The crowd surged towards the beach like zombies. The first boat was already packed with people. What was even more deadly was that a group of people were desperately climbing onto the hull. The ship began to tilt violently and quickly capsized. John instantly realized something was wrong and with cheer continued running frantically towards the next ship. Halfway, suddenly he saw several people desperately trying to snap his friend's mask. John and Anna rushed over, forcefully pulling the people away and dragging their friend who had already choked on water out of the sea. Just then, John's protective mask was stolen. John didn't bother to chase after them and with his friend ran desperately towards the next ship. Finally, they squeezed into the cabin, coughing and choking. As soon as they stood still, shouts came from inside. "Close the door! Close it!" If the door wasn't closed soon, no one could leave. The person holding the door grit his teeth and ruthlessly slammed it shut. More than half the people outside hadn't had time to board. They pounded on the hull and let out desperate screams. Just then, Nathan suddenly tugged at John. John turned around and saw a wall of water tens of meters high surging towards them. The crowd on the shore who hadn't boarded completely collapsed when they saw this. They screamed and ran back, but it was too late. The giant wave was like a monstrous beast, instantly swallowing up all life on the shore in an instant. The small boat was tossed and turned wildly in the huge waves. Everyone was thrown about several times before it finally stabilized. John checked the direction and suggested that the boat sail southeast. If all went well, it would take a week to reach London, but a week on the vast ocean and in this confined cabin would be anything but easy. John took out a detector and checked the air quality. To his surprise, the air quality was good. Only then did people dare to take off their protective masks and breathe in the long-awaited fresh air. However, no one was happy. Iceland had completely disappeared and the direction of the sea flow had changed. No one knew if they could reach London safely. Everyone could only pray silently. After nightfall, John lay in the cabin, occasionally opening his eyes to look around, fearing that something unexpected might happen. The next day, the accident still happened. The ship suddenly stopped, the engine malfunctioned, and the whole ship was adrift at sea, motionless. If this continued, there would only be death. John crawled into the engine room and did a thorough inspection. Fortunately, he finally fixed the ship. That night, John and his son looked up at the sky. The Milky Way was gone. In its place, countless fragments of rock floated in space like an eerie band of light across the sky. Several days passed quickly, and the ship's food was running out. Everyone was starving and drowsy, leaning against the cabin, motionless. Just then, the ship suddenly hit something and came crashing down. John pushed open the door and saw nothing but submerged buildings. The rooftops of tall buildings were visible above the water, but it was clear from those buildings that this was Liverpool. The group instantly came to their senses, and the ship quickly approached the nearby land. They walked along the street and found a sign that read, "Liverpool has been abandoned." John took out a detector and checked the air quality. It was barely acceptable, but long-term exposure to this radiation would be extremely harmful to the body. They had to find an air raid stand or refuge as soon as possible. Just then, several figures suddenly appeared ahead. John immediately led his family to follow. They hadn't gone far when the scene before them stunned them. There was a large number of refugees gathered there. Due to long-term exposure to radiation, their skin had changed. Not far away, there was a high isolation wall. Soldiers inside were armed and ready for battle. An officer stood on the top of the wall and shouted loudly, "Only high-ranking officials with passes are allowed to enter." Anna quickly took out her token and held it up. The officer glanced at it and nodded. Just as everyone breathed a sigh of relief, John's friend suddenly panicked. His token was missing. The friend rushed to the wall shouting his name and rank. Seeing that the scene was on the verge of getting out of control, the soldiers stopped their standoff. Chaos erupted instantly. The soldiers immediately forced the entrance shut, and John's family was unable to enter. Just then, the sky in the distance suddenly changed color, and a massive radiation storm was rapidly sweeping in. The crowd exploded and scattered in all directions. John grabbed Cheer and ran. Just then, a car approached. John rushed up and blocked the car. He asked the driver to give them a ride to London. The driver turned on his watch and held out his hand, saying he needed a watch in exchange. John took off his watch without hesitation and handed it to him. The driver accepted it and opened the car door. John quickly pulled Cheer into the car and thanked the driver profusely. In this apocalyptic world, encountering someone willing to help was already incredibly lucky. Little did they know that real danger awaited them. The car sped towards London. After traveling for most of the distance, the driver stopped the car on the side of the road and said everyone could get out and use the restroom. John and Cheer got out of the car, but after only a short while outside, he sensed something was wrong. Suddenly, a strange noise came from the sky. John subconsciously touched the ground. His